Shalom, shalom, YHWH. Hallelujah. All honor and praise be to the Most High, always and forever. In this video, I want to cover the Halacha of Kashering Utensils and also the laws of Kashrut, some of the laws of Kashrut dealing with the dietary laws that, are definitely a lot deeper than some of the things that are relayed in Leviticus 14 or Deuteronomy 14. The actual minutiae, if you will, of Kashrut and the dietary laws. So first, I'll cover some of the things dealing with the Kashering of Utensils. So hallelujah, and let's continue to grow Israel as we embody the ways of our forefathers. So for Kashering Utensils, the first verse I'm going to go to in the Torah is in the book of Numbers, chapter 31, and verse 21. And I'm going to be reading verse 21 and 23. Or 21 through 23. So it says, Eleazar the Kohen said to the men of the legion who came to the battle, "This is the decree of the Torah which YHWH commanded Moses. Only the gold and the silver, the copper, the iron, the tin, and the lead, everything that has come into the fire, you shall pass through the fire, and it will be purified. But it must be purified with the water of sprinkling. And everything that would not come into the fire, you shall pass through the water." So this is referring to the utensils that the Israelites got from a battle that took place, that they got from a Gentile nation. So, and these are the utensils that they received from that after the battle. So one of the things that regarding to this halacha that's made known is that when we are using or we receive utensils from Gentiles, that we need to cash them so that they are clean, in a ritual sense, for use as Israelites. And being that we are in captivity, when we go out to stores and we buy utensils, yeah, they're new, but they've been made by Gentiles. So when you buy new utensils, you need to cash them and get in the practice of cashing utensils, because it deals with your sanctity as an Israelite and as you draw close to the Most High. And when using, or in regards to used utensils, you have to remove that non-kosher taste that might be used. Now, granted, if it's a pot that, you got from your cousin or you got from, somebody up the street, and you know that they've been cooking some pork or something, I would just throw out the pot completely. I wouldn't even try to casher it, because ultimately it's not going to work. But regarding to new utensils or a utensil that they haven't used biblically commanded off limits abominable meat, but still meat, like, they still might have been using beef, or they might have been, eating fish, but it wasn't kosher fish, it wasn't kosher beef, which I'll get to. Those you can perform this method with. So one of the things that was understood by the sages in regards to this ruling, regarding to this halacha, is the same manner as it was absorbed, so it is expelled. So there's two ways that is mentioned in the Torah that we just read, that verse in the Torah that we just read, which is the passing through the fire, which is referred to as libun, which is fire scorching. And then you have what passes through the water, which is Hagalah, or boiling water pouring. So in regards to these two things, I'll be going through some stuff. So we have earthenware vessels, or vessels that are made out of clay, libun or Hagalah. Neither of those work with those kind of vessels, because whatever has been cooked in it, the taste has seeped into the clay walls of the pot, of the utensil, and when dealing with clay, it can't really be removed. So in those instances, you're better off not using it, breaking it. I wouldn't use it. Now, in regards to stone or brick ovens, libun is a good practice of going about. So somebody that has an oven, a way that they can casher their oven, if it's a stone or a brick oven, is turn the heat all the way up and put stones on the grill of the oven and allow that to sit for at least an hour, so that the taste that has seeped into that oven can be removed. Now, in regards to wood, metal, stone, or bone, as it's used, utensils use Hagalah, which would be the pouring of the boiling water, which I'll get to. Now, prior to kashering utensils, you want to make sure that you wash them thoroughly. Before, I would suggest is throwing it in the dishwasher, even if it's a new utensil. I mean, most people have a good practice of when they buy new utensils from stores, they wash them before they use them. That's a good practice already to do. And essentially, before somebody goes about the method of kashering their utensils, they should wash them in similar regard. So, utensils that you use with fire and no water, laboon would be used, or the fire scorching. When you have mixing bowls and stuff that you use spices with, Hagalah should be used, the pouring of the water, because the spices is going to make that taste seep into the walls of that mixing pot. Even though you don't have heat per se being used, the taste can still seep into that mixing bowl. So Hagalah would be a good thing to do with mixing bowls. Utensils that soak in liquid for 24 hours, or for many of our people, myself included, who use Tupperware to store leftovers, and those leftovers might sit for 24 hours or a day. Those utensils also should be kashered with Hagalah, with the pouring of the hot water to remove the taste, and to kasher it. So another thing to do when you're performing Hagalah, whatever utensil that you're using to pour on the utensil that you're using Hagalah, it should be a direct from this utensil that has the boiling water onto the utensil that you're kashering. It shouldn't be transferred to another utensil and then poured, because then the water isn't effective. It should be going straight from the utensil that has the boiling water onto the utensil that's being kashered. Tables and countertops, in regards to your kitchen, how to kasher those things. After you've cleaned the table off or cleaned the countertop off and left it for 24 hours and it hasn't been used, after that you would take the boiling water and you would pour it on the tabletop, on the countertop, in order to kasher it. And this is in regards to kashering your kitchen. Now, in regards to an oven, per se, somebody that has an oven in their house, how would they kasher that? The way to go about doing that is to turn the heat up all of the way. Generally, most people have a broil setting. Turn it up all the way to its highest heat and leave it there for an hour. Now, in regards to stovetops, the way to go about kashering those is to turn those up to that 9, or the highest setting, whatever it might be on your stove, and leave it there for at least 30 minutes. I would suggest an hour for that as well, so that can be kashered too, because what you're doing regards to the stove tops or the oven is you're burning any excess of whatever could have been cooked in there, and removing that taste, removing whatever could be left. And in particular, just in relation to the feast, when Pesach comes around and you need to remove all comments from your house, that's a really good practice to do, so that any comments that you could have cooked on your stovetop or in your oven throughout the year is burned up completely. So, definitely in regard to Pesach, but just overall, it's a good thing to do, so that you can have a kashered or a kosher kitchen. Something else, in regards to drinking glasses or measuring cups, different measuring utensils you have, those you can kasher with the method of Hagalah, which is the pouring of the hot water. Now, if Hagalah is performed in one pot, the water in that pot can be used as long as the water does not get murky. Once it gets murky, you definitely want to change the water out. I mean, granted, if you're cleaning all of the utensils beforehand, as you should, and you're just using water out of the sink and then you're boiling it, I wouldn't think of an instance where the water would get murky. But I just wanted to note that for those that might have that situation or might come across that. So if Hagalah is performed with tongs, and in regards to this, I'm gonna give you guys what I did in my bath. When Hagalah is performed with tongs, is I had a pot sitting on the stovetop, and I had it with the water boiling, and the water was pretty much up to the brim, and the water was boiling. The tongs, I made sure that they were kashrut first, performed Hagalah on them, and then I took those tongs, and with each utensil, whether it was a fork, I'd grab it, drop it in the pot, let go of it with the tong, let it sit in there for a second or two, grab it back out, and then put it to the side and dry. And then continually doing that so that the utensils, because the tong, you don't want to hold on to the utensil, dip it in, and then pull it out without letting the utensil go, because it could be ineffective, because the part that you're holding on very strongly with the tong, the part that's on the utensil, the water might not touch that part. And the purpose of Hagalah, just as the purpose of when we perform miklaot for our bodies, is we want to make sure that the water touches all surfaces of the utensil. So when you would dip it, remove it. Try not to put too many utensils in the pot at once, because granted, the utensils can touch, but it's kind of the same instance of you having the tong dipping the utensil in and not letting it go. If you put in 4 or 5 different utensils in that pot at once, you might have to worry about, is the water touching all parts of the utensil in the places where each utensil in this pot are touching each other. So the safest bet, I feel, is to do one utensil at a time. It might be time consuming, but ultimately you have to realize the reasoning of why you're doing this is to draw closer to the kadoshness, the set apartness of the Most High. As He commanded our forefathers, we should be embodying these ways in our generation, to show that we have that intention and that desire to go back and to embody the fullness of the Torah, the fullness of it. So now that I've covered Hagalah and the bone and what different ways that you can go about doing that, I want to move to the topic of having kosher food, or the differences between where you might get your food, how you know it's kosher, the process of what makes food kosher, and how our forefathers looked at it. So dealing with some of these things, the word for kosher slaughter is shakita. So when dealing with kosher slaughter, the animal that would be slaughtered would be removed from the flock so that all the other animals don't see that this animal, in the act of being slaughtered, because, that put fear in the other animals, and in a sense that gets their adrenaline pumping. The adrenaline is running through their flesh, running through the meat. So to avoid all of that, the animal that's going to be slaughtered would be removed from the flock. And the knife that would be used is called a kalif. Now this knife is generally, it would be twice the length of the neck of the animal. Now granted, disclaimer, I'm just telling you guys the process of this, not because I've performed a kosher slaughter before or, what have you, but I just feel like our people need to know these things so that when they go into a store and they see something that says kosher meat or what have you, they know the labor-intensive method that was behind what made this meat kosher. So just wanted to put that out there. So the knife used, like I was saying, would be a kalif. After that, the animal before the slaughter is examined for any blemishes or what have you, because if the animal has any blemishes, that meat wouldn't be kosher. So even if it's a cow or a lamb or a goat, if the animal has any blemishes, which they examine before the slaughter, the animal's meat would not be kosher. So just wanted to note that. So then what would be done is the animals would be positioned in a way where like the neck is up, and they would make it one swift, quick cut. And there's certain arteries that they're aiming for, which I'll get to, but it's one swift cut, and due to the angle of the cut, the sharpness of the blade, it's meant so that the animal does not feel the pain and dies within 2 seconds, so that there's no extreme pain induced. And kind of in regard to how most meat that people buy out of grocery stores, those animals are shocked to death in bulk. Whether it's chickens or cows. With cows, that I don't even know the exact name of what tool it is, but they just blow hot or not hot air, pressured air straight into the skull and just kind of shoot it right in the scalp. Or for chickens, they shock them in bulk. Granted, I'll get to that later, but that animal or that meat is not kosher, and that's pretty much all the meat that you would buy at a Food Lion or a Kroger's, depending on wherever you are in the U.S. or wherever you are. Most of that meat is not kosher, even though it might be beef, it might be chicken, but it's not kosher. Just wanted to note that. So when the animal is being cut, the 4 main arteries that are being aimed for, you have the esophagus, which is being cut, which is the food pipe. Then you have the trachea, which is cut, which is the windpipe. Then you have the carotid arteries that are cut, which carries the blood to the brain and the face. And then you have the jugular veins that are cut, which carries the blood from the brain back down to the heart. So all those arteries are cut in one swift cut motion with the sharp Keli knife. Animal bleeds out, dies within 2 seconds. The blood is then drained from the animal, and then after that, the animal's organs are then examined, because now that the animal has deceased, they are able to examine the lungs and different parts of the internal workings of the animal. And if they find any blemishes at that point, that meat is not kosher. So there's a lot of methods that go into making sure that the meat is kosher. There's an examining before and examining after, one external, one internal. It's a very meticulous process, which is why the meat, some people might say, oh, kosher meat costs a lot more than meat that you get out of a grocery store. There's a reason for that. It's healthier for you, and the methodology behind why and how they went about making sure that it's kosher. It's a very intensive process. So after, that's pretty much the workings of kosher slaughter. Now, one of the words that is used for meat that biblically we can eat, beef, lamb, chicken, goat, what have you, but is meat that has been blemished or has not been slaughtered correctly, that meat is referred to as treifa or treif, whichever, there's different ways of saying it, but that's what that meat is referred to. So what I was saying a bit earlier about meat that people get out of grocery stores, yeah, it's beef, yeah, it's chicken, but that's treif meat, it's treifa. And I want to go real quick to a few verses. First, I'm going to go to the book of Ezekiel. And this is going to be coming out of Ezekiel, the 4th chapter. All right. The 4th chapter and the 14th verse. And this says, let me start at the 13th verse. It says, YHWH said, thus will the children of Israel eat their food unclean among the nations where I will banish them. But I said, being Ezekiel, alas, YHWH Elohim, behold, my soul has not been defiled. I have never eaten carrion nor meat from a wounded animal from my youth until now, nor has loathsome meat ever come into my mouth. Now, the word that's used, that Ezekiel used over here when he was referring to wounded animal is trefa, spelled with a tet, a resh, a fe, a pe, and a ha. Trefa, which is essentially meat that wounded, blemished meat, because the word trefa comes from the Hebrew word taraf, which means to tear. So we see that Ezekiel, a descendant of Levi, took the meat that he ate very seriously. He did not eat trefa. If he was alive today, he would not be shopping in a Food Lion or a Kroger, or what have you, a Publix, for meat, because he would know that that is trefa. And this affects the spirituality of an individual. When somebody eats pork, it's very hard to talk to them about spiritual matters because their ears, in a sense, are plugged. And when it comes to trefa, it affects our spirituality. We have to really be very meticulous with what we are putting in our body. So this is what Ezekiel, in his practice, and how serious he took it. So another example I want to go to is in the book of Daniel. Give me 1 second. And this is going to be coming out of Daniel, the 1st chapter, and starting at the 8th verse. And it says, Daniel set the resolve in his heart not to be defiled by the king's food, nor by his drinking wine. So he requested of the chief officer that he not be defiled. Elohim granted Daniel favor and mercy before the chief officer. And the chief officer said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who has provided your food and your drinks, lest he see your faces, may ill at the ease than the other youths in your situation, and you will forfeit my head to the king. So Daniel said to the steward, whom the chief officer had assigned to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please test your servants for 10 days, and let them give us of the pulse, and we will eat, and give us water, and we will drink. Then let our appearances and the appearances of the youths who eat the king's food be seen by you, and act towards your servants in accordance with what you see. He heeded them in this matter, and tested them for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, their appearance seemed better, and they were of healthier flesh than all the youths eating the king's food. Now, Prophet Daniel, was from the line of Judah. So we understand that it wasn't just a Levite practice, if you will, in regarding to Ezekiel. Daniel was from the line of Judah, and he also took very seriously not to eat trefa meat. And in this case, it's very clear being shown that he is not eating meat that is made by Gentiles. Very clearly showing that. So our forefathers took this very seriously in regards to not eating trefa. So, when somebody, the many options, let me put it that way, the many options that somebody has going about in keeping this, first priority, try to find a kosher butcher, kosher grocery store in your area, in your location. If you can't do that, there's places online where you can order kosher meat and it'll be shipped to your house frozen. Those are options, because you know that it's kosher meat, it's been slaughtered correctly, it's been examined correctly, and it hasn't been group shocked like most of the meat that people buy in grocery stores. And that even goes for fast food, which I'm sure you were able to grasp. These food out of grocery stores, whether it's KFC, whatever it be, that is trefa chicken. Yeah, it's chicken. So, somebody might think that they're keeping kosher because they read Leviticus 11 or Deuteronomy 14 and, think that they're keeping kosher because, this animal isn't considered an abomination. But it's trefa meat. It wasn't slaughtered correctly. So that needs to be understood and taken into consideration, Israel. This is affecting our spirituality. And, It needs to be noted. So another thing dealing with this topic, dealing with Kashrut or the dietary laws, is the concept of milk and meat and the mixing thereof. So for this, I want to go to a few verses in the Torah. First, I'll be going to the book of Exodus. This is Exodus chapter 23, verse 19. And it says, "The choicest of first fruit of your land shall you bring to the house of YHWH, your Elohim. You shall not cook a kid in the milk of its mother." Okay. Let's go to Exodus chapter 34, verses 26, which says, "The first of your land's early produce you shall bring to the temple of YHWH, your Elohim. Do not cook a kid in its mother's milk." Okay, let's go to the book of Deuteronomy. And this is coming out of Deuteronomy chapter 14, which is the chapter which is the reiteration of Leviticus 11, where it talks about the dietary laws. And in that chapter, in verse 21, Deuteronomy 14:21, it says, "You shall not eat any carcass. To the stranger who is in your city shall you give it, that he may eat it, or sell it to a Gentile. You are the set-apart people to YHWH, your Elohim. You shall not cook a kid in its mother's milk." Okay, so we have 3 times that this is mentioned in Torah. And I mean, the third time, it's right there smack dab in the dietary law chapter, if you will. So what are we supposed to go about doing this? How do we interact with this? Well, first and foremost, we understand that it's referring to a kid in its mother's milk. So it's referring to animals that produce milk. So let's think about that. A cheeseburger is beef, which comes from a cow. A cow produces milk. Cheese is a byproduct of milk. So that isn't according to kosher standards. And I mean, that's very clear. That's just one example. Now, something that people can do going about with their utensils is that they should have separate utensils, or separate pots, if you will. If a pot that they cook meat out of, and then a pot that they might use to cook, milk byproducts, cheese, or what have you in. Excuse me. Those pots should be separate. It kind of defeats the purpose. As earlier in this lesson, if somebody has a pot that they cook beef in, and then they turn around and they're cooking some cheese or some milk, and they're going back and forth, it defeats the purpose. So those pots should be separate. Now, when it comes to fowl or birds or fish, they don't produce milk. So just want that to be noted. Now, in regards to mixing of fish and meat, there's no prohibition in regards to this, but our sages did say that you should wait at around 6 hours. And this is more so on the health aspect, because when your body is breaking down these substances at the same time, there's chances of certain diseases forming if your body is breaking down beef and tilapia, for example, at the same time. So just for health reasons, it should be avoided. Now, in regards to if somebody were to have milk and meat, let's say they have a entree where they're eating meat, but then they have a cake for dessert, which clearly, more than likely, has some milk byproducts in it. What would they do? That individual should wait at least an hour in between to give their body enough time to digest and get that meat down before they throw some dairy in there. So just as a rule of thumb, try to wait at least an hour if you're going to be eating meat and then having a dairy dessert afterwards. So in regards to salting your meat, at any grocery store, you should be able to find kosher salt. Generally, it has this Star David on it so that you know. Well, some people might not call it the Star David, what have you. I'm not going there. But it has that symbol on this salt so that you know that it's kosher. It's kind of more coarse salt, a little bit bigger than your regular table salt. And what you would do is have a utensil or something that you can put the meat on that there's drainage under it. You want to salt all surface areas of the meat and leave it there to pretty much pull whatever excess blood could still be left, and sit it there for at least an hour. Now, in regards to that, after you finish that, you want to wash it off thoroughly, make sure that there's no salt on it, and then you can either, if that's what you plan on cooking that day, cook it, or you can repackage it, put it in the freezer. If you buy meat from a butcher or what have you, you want to make sure that you salt your meat within the first 3 days. Within the first 3 days, you want to do that. So another rule of thumb, as I mentioned before, top priority, try to find a kosher butcher somewhere in your area so that you know that the meat that you're getting is kosher. If you can't do that, try to find, there's plenty places online where you can order kosher food, order kosher meat, and they will ship it to your house. That's another option. Now, granted, the last two options that I'm going to mention, they aren't making the food kosher, but it would be a better practice as stepping stones to work your way to. So the next two things I would suggest is, if you can't find any kosher butcher near you, if you feel as though ordering online is out of reach, try to find a halal butcher in your area. If you can't do that, do what most people probably already have been doing, and getting their meat out of regular grocery stores. With all four of those options, salting, making sure that the blood is pulled out and what have you is good. But like I said, for the halal or the regular meat option, the salting isn't making it kosher, but it's good practice, at least to get you on a stepping stone of how our forefathers went about interacting with these different ways of being a Hebrew, and keeping your dietary practice very high, and really trying to walk in the ways of Ezekiel, Daniel, and how they went about saying, I'm not eating treifa, I'm not eating feet or eating meat that's made by Gentiles. So as all of us continue to turn back to the ways of our forefathers, these are things we need to embody, things we need to embrace. Come on, Israel, we got to do better. I know sometimes people might have angst about walking in a Jewish butcher and buying meat, but the meat is kosher. We need to be able to get a little bit past that and understand that the food that we're putting in our body is affecting us spiritually. So I just wanted to mention that as some Halacha and some things that our people can do, some things that we can continue to grow in and do better. If anybody has any questions, I will leave my email in the comments section. Israel, let's continue to grow. Let's continue to build as a nation, rise as a nation, and ultimately keep the Most High first, and as the helm of it all, holding Torah high above our heads, always and forever. So hallelujah, all praise and honor being due to him always. Shalom, shalom, Israel.